Nassau County Executive Bruce Blakeman invites you to mark 1 year since Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th. Join us as we come together this Monday, October 7th at 6 p.m. at the Harry Chapin Lakeside Theater in Eisenhower Park. Let's stand together in solidarity with Israel and those held hostage Monday, October 7th, 6 p.m. at Eisenhower Park. For more information, visit nassaucountyny.gov.
Welcome to the 5 o'clock show. It's time for Common Sense. Now, it's Katz and Cosby with John Katzimatidis and Rita Cosby, standing for truth, justice, and the American way, bringing common sense to the world. Now, here's John Katzimatidis and Rita Cosby. Breaking news, WABC.
Well, we have a lot of breaking news today. We're going to have an update on the hurricane any minute now to see where the exact location is. I mean, it's a horrible day, Rita. It's
a horrible day. And I'm telling you, I was looking at the hurricane hunters who go into the eye of the storm, and it's an enormous eye. There's no doubt it's going to be very severe when it hits land. It's supposed to hit land, John, in a matter of hours from now. And what's interesting is it's coming, it's coming across Florida. It's going to hit Florida first, and there's going to be enormous storm surge, enormous winds, enormous rain.
We have the Congresswoman from Miami calling in.
Yeah, Congresswoman Maria Salazar is going to be joining us to give us a sense of what it is like on the ground.
She's a dynamite lady. I'd like to know what the heck is going on. And if FEMA is short money and they don't have any money for our previous Hurricane Helene, what are they going to do now?
Yeah, well, that's the mess. And you got Alejandro Mayorkas, who came out recently, said, hey, we may not have money for the rest of the season. And then they announced, I think it's a legitimate point. Then they announced X amount of money going to Lebanon, X amount of money elsewhere. There are members of the GOP, by the way, in the last hour who just said that they would like an audit of FEMA because apparently there's money sitting in other pots. So why is it not going there?
But Rudy Washington, who's deputy mayor, and I, as general counsel, city council, both know from doing city budgets that there's always hidden money. There's always money to be moved around.
There's always money.
Exactly.
Is that correct? Isn't there money to be moved around?
If the president of the United States wants to move money, there is always money. And what could be more important than helping these poor people in the middle of the hurricane?
And as the judge knows, under exigent circumstance, you can do just about anything you want.
Of course. You move the money around. It's not a big deal.
Yes.
It just shows you, by the way, how out of touch the Homeland Secretary is about his own agency, his own responsibilities.
Well, it says a lot about their priorities because it seems like they react super quickly when it's something else. And yet here it seems to be labored.
Rita.
And you know what I'll tell you? I'm really actually angry today because I was sitting there watching their quote, FEMA emergency briefing. And it's the first time I've ever seen that with the President Biden. You see remotely Kamala Harris after her little beer drinking stint, right? You see all of that stuff going on. And they spend 90% of the time saying, well, Trump said this. And I'm thinking people just want to be helped, to John's point. Get rid of the politics.
It's even worse than that. FEMA has guidelines about priorities, about who they help, and it's all about diversity, equity, and inclusion. You imagine that? Instead of maximizing the savings of lives, they're talking about who they're going to rush to help first and include people in, include people out. It's awful.
It is disgusting. And there's been a couple whistleblowers who have come forward talking about some of the standards that they have. And apparently there's anywhere from 6 to 8 billion sitting in a pot somewhere. And guess what? I'm sorry. It's 1.4 billion to migrants. It was 174 million just a little bit ago to Lebanon for humanitarian aid. And then you hear the people in North Carolina who just went through Hurricane Helene who are saying they can't even get the $750. Rudy Washington.
$750?
Yeah.
What are you supposed to do with that?
Pray. Because that's all you got when you got $750.
I'm beginning to believe these people claim
everything. They've lost everything, these poor people.
They claim they love America, but they hate Americans. That's the way I'm looking at this now. This is incredible. People are dying, and we're faced with, right now, something very, very catastrophic, and we're not prepared. We're talking about no money. This is insanity. These people should be run out of town on a rail. Really, this is horrible.
I agree. And today, during this briefing, you guys, they were patting themselves on the back, taking jabs at Trump. I thought it was so inappropriate. Focus on the job at hand.
This is not a campaign issue. This is a humanitarian crisis.
Exactly, which, by the way, is why DeSantis also, apparently Kamala Harris is upset because she called DeSantis. DeSantis didn't know he called her, and he said, I don't have anything to talk with her about. I'm not talking about politics now. I'm trying to save my people in my state.
Did you see what the president did to her? The president said, oh, yeah, the governor and I have been working together well, and he's doing a good job.
Yes, it was like, way to go. And in fact, DeSantis was praising Biden. Biden was praising DeSantis, and it was like Kamala who. That was it was a wild moment too, Rudy. I saw that. And by the way, speaking of Trump, you guys, also, there's word he's going to be doing a rally at Madison Square Garden.
What's the date, Rita?
It's end of October. But what's interesting,
it's either October
John,
27th or 28th or something.
Yeah, and you know what, John, the same dates, by the way, that got handed out just recently. Fox is still trying to resurrect yet another debate. It just happened in the last few hours. They threw out 2 or 3 dates. One of them is the MSG date, but no word if either campaign is going to accept another debate.
I don't think Kamala's going to accept it.
Yeah, I don't think she can handle another debate.
She can't even handle a real interview, for God's sakes. How is she going to have a real debate?
Yeah, how about with Stephen Colbert?
With a fair moderator.
Popping the beer. How about, getting back to what we were talking about with the storm, you guys, here she is. She was in New York yesterday doing a round of interviews. She goes to Stephen Colbert. She did The View where she said, I'm just like Joe Biden, same thing. And then she pops a beer on Stephen Colbert. I'm sorry. Right now, as John was just talking, look what's going on in North Carolina. They're still trying to figure out where their homes are. Florida's about to be battered, and she's popping a beer. It's inappropriate. I'm sorry. Very, very inappropriate. Completely inappropriate.
All right, we have Congresswoman Salazar on.
Yes, we do. Joining us is Congresswoman Maria Salazar from the great state of Florida. Congresswoman, are you there in Florida right now?
Yes, I am. I'm in Miami, right in my district, very close to where the storm is going to be passing by. But unfortunately, we're not going to be in the eye of it.
Thank goodness.
We were just talking on the air right now. If FEMA doesn't have enough money for last week's storm, what's going to happen with you guys in Florida?
Well, that's correct. And that is the most worrisome part of this whole thing. John, we are used to hurricanes. We're Floridians, so we have 2 or 3 every year. I lived Andrew in 1992. We just lived Ian last year, and we just had Helene. But the problem, we're not used to not having funds from FEMA. That's a very big problem.
And the other report that Rita just had was the fact that FEMA is giving the money to where they want to give it to, not necessarily treating everybody equally.
Well, yes, that's correct. And that is something that we need to look into it. And the fact that the Inspector General said that we have $8 billion remaining plus many other monies from other hurricanes that we didn't have to use those funds for. And how come now Secretary Mayorkas is saying that we don't have the money? You see, we never see that. We have never seen that. FEMA it's bipartisan. It doesn't matter where the storm passed by, who is going to be needing it, whether independents or Republicans or Democrats. How could this be happening at the federal level? And it's just one more issue, one more example of the very bad administration from the Biden-Harris camp. It's all coming up to light, and it's very good because the average voter will see what type of federal government they have under Harris.
By the way, the 5 o'clock report, the good news is it was down to 115 to 120 miles an hour.
That's good.
Yeah, it went from a Category 4 to now a Category 3, which is good. So that's, Congresswoman, would you support also, as we were just talking here with John about the question of funds, would you support a number of GOP members have come out in the last hour or so asking for an audit, saying there should be an audit, a federal audit of FEMA to know where the money is going and what's sitting there and what they're really using the money on?
Sure. We should have audits on every single taxpayer money, whether it's from FEMA or whether it's Homeland Security or any other department that it's being funded by the guy who is listening to me, by the taxpayers. But in this case, we need to see where the money went to. Is it true that it went to help right there where you guys are in New York City and Chicago and Pennsylvania, in the blue states, to shelter and to feed and to help the people who came in through the southern border. That's something that we have never seen either. I mean, the southern border it's open. 10 million people came in.
This has never happened in American history where an organization like FEMA will treat people differently. And the money is there someplace. There's always money. When the president of the United States wants to send money, there has never been a situation where he says, I don't have it.
It's just a question of priorities, John. Yeah. To me, it's priorities.
And, the other thing, Congresswoman, the other thing that I have to tell all our listeners, we may have 1 million listeners out there. And what I want to tell them is in 28 days, 27 days, there's going to be an election. If all the evils that are going on, if you don't vote for the GOP having a majority, guess what? Everything is going to be buried. And that's the biggest danger, that everything that's going on, all the bad things that are going on in our country are just going to be buried.
Oh, I agree. And that's why I keep on saying to the Hispanics, and that has been my lane. Everyone who's listening to me, whether you're a registered Democrat, it doesn't matter. Don't let them fool you that Trump is a threat to democracy. No. The threat to democracy is having to pay $10 for eggs or the gas or the fact that they're talking to children about sex in kindergarten. Or that is a threat to democracy, where they don't even want you to speak because you're a conservative. That's a free speech issue. That's the threat to democracy. And that's why I'm saying to the Hispanics who are listening to me, and you have a lot of them in the New York City area, it's time to move parties and give an opportunity to the GOP. The GOP is the party of progress, the one that gives you the opportunity to live a dignified life in the promised land. That's why we're here. My parents came. They're political refugees. It doesn't matter who you are. If you have the voting card in your hand, use it well.
Congresswoman, and you know better than I do, but it seems like there are so many even Hispanics who came to the country legally. I'm a first generation American. But when you look at it, they came through the process. There are many Hispanics who really resent the fact that the migrants are being put up in, for example, in New York City, the average hotel room, I saw this the other day, it's $388 a night is what taxpayers are paying. And they're giving $750 to people who lost their homes in North Carolina.
Total money versus to the migrants $388 every day.
Yeah, and that's just for the hotel, John. That's just for the staying at the hotel. Right. That doesn't include the food.
We got to move on.
I mean, it is incredible. Your thoughts, Congresswoman?
Well, that's why you have to question the intention of the Biden-Harris administration in allowing 10 million people to come in through the southern border in the last 4 years. What was their plan? Why did that happen? That never happened under Clinton, under Obama. Obama and Clinton and many other Democrat presidents secured the border. We do know that we have a major problem with immigration. And, I wrote the dignity bill, which we can always discuss later because at some point we get to see what we're going to do. But at this point, what we need to do is start deporting people who are from the Tren de Aragua, the Venezuelans who are the transnational criminal organization, the M13, the 2 million gotaways. Who are those people? Chinese spies, members of Hamas. God knows who they are. We're talking about 2 million people that got away. Those are the ones we have to start looking for. So go back to the Democrats who are listening to me, the Hispanics who are registered Democrats. That's fine. You can be registered in any party you want to. But this is a moment where you have to think what's happening to your city and what's happening to your country. And we got to change courses because Hispanics, we have the same values that are entrenched in the Republican Party. At one point, that were also entrenched in the Democratic Party. God-fearing, law-abiding, pro-family, pro-life, pro-small government, small taxes. Yep. So what's happening here? We got to save the country. Regardless of the political party you are you are registered in.
Absolutely.
Thank you,
Perfect ending, right?
Thank
Wow.
you, Congresswoman Salazar, and we hope everything is fine with you, your county, and your family.
That's correct, and the whole country. And we will get through this. We are in the United States where everything is possible.
God bless
My
you.
love to you, and thank you for the opportunity, John.
Thank you. Stay safe. Wow. And now we have some breaking news. I think John Solomon's calling in.
Breaking news, WABC.
And joining us now with some big breaking news is the founder of Just the News, John Solomon. You've got an interesting probe that Democrats may be using Act Blue. Explain this. This is a big deal and what it means for voting integrity.
It is. Act Blue is the largest online fundraising platform that Democrats use. It's raised hundreds of millions of dollars for candidates like Kamala Harris, all the Senate candidates running in these closely contested races in the 2024 election. There's nothing like it on the right. In fact, Act Blue is so much larger than anything that the Republicans have created for online fundraising. That said, there has been growing suspicions in the last year that Act Blue may be used by some Democrats to cheat on fundraising. There are specific allegations that there are donors who have come forward saying, I'm listed as giving lots of money through Act Blue. I didn't make those donations. And Congress recently dug in, and they, in a big way, they did an analysis of all of Act Blue's donations in the last couple of years. They found some significant and troubling patterns that they said looked like money laundering, looked like straw donors, meaning people were donations were being given in the name of people who didn't know and didn't give the money. They, Congress, specifically the House Administration Committee, referred this matter to 5 states' attorney general, where they found the worst pattern of potential abuse. That happened just 2 weeks ago. In the 2 weeks since that referral came from Congress to 5 states, that sprawling investigation has now exploded into 19 states. 19 different states and their attorneys general, their top law enforcement officials, have opened investigations into Act Blue and the possibility that Act Blue is being abused to make straw donations and to launder money into the election from people who it's not listed from. And today, I had a chance to interview the chairman of the committee that started this whole process, House Administration Committee Chairman Brian Stile, and he said, John, we're increasingly concerned that Act Blue might actually have foreign money coming into the United States elections. He's specifically said they're beginning an effort to get the Treasury Department to let them know or to give them evidence whether foreign money is coming through the Act Blue system. Now, these are still allegations. They're still in the investigative stage, but for 19 attorneys general to do anything in concert, that is a massive investigation, very rare, and it is very active right now.
Wow, that is really interesting. Really quick, what does that mean for voter integrity? Because that's the most important thing. First of all, you want to make sure that it's U.S. money going in. But boy, that is really widespread. We just have about 30 seconds left, John.
Well, listen, the first primary is always the money primary. The more money you have to spend, the more ads you can have, the more likelihood you can win an election. So if Democrats have stocked their coffers with money that may not be allowed, may be over the limits or from foreign sources, it would suggest one of the larger cheating scandals, perhaps larger than the one that struck Bill Clinton's presidency, known as Chinagate, where millions of dollars of China money was routed into the U.S. elections in 96 through straw donors. A lot of people beginning to draw parallels. The investigations are now deeply underway. We'll see what the outcome is.
I understand,
John. They say they're not doing anything wrong, but they will cooperate.
John, I understand that she's raised over $1 billion since August when she got the nomination.
Yeah, Kamala Harris. That's incredible.
Yeah, about $400 million, I think, in a single month through Act Blue, which is just an astounding amount because Act Blue does things in really small amounts. So that's some of the suspicion. Could that much money really be raised that quickly? Those are some of the things that Congress and now these 19 attorneys generals are looking into.
Well, I think the investigation is, we should find out the truth.
Absolutely. John Solomon, thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Wow, very interesting, John.
We better find out the truth. And like I said to the Congresswoman, if we vote out the Republicans that are doing the investigation, everything is going to be buried.
Right.
We'll never know the truth.
No, it's so important. Judge Weinberg.
John, you're absolutely correct. If you didn't have the House Republicans controlling the United States House of Representatives, everything would have been buried. The whole Hunter Biden,
foreign money
Joe
coming
Biden
in,
corruption.
Foreign money
buried.
coming in is probably more true than not.
That's right. You need to have a check against these kinds of abuses, and you can only do that if you have an aggressive legislative house, the House or the Senate.
Yeah, absolutely. For sure.
Okay,
Wow.
why don't we take a break, and who are we coming back with?
We have Victoria Coates, who's going to talk about this big bust of an Afghan national who is planning a mass attack on Election Day. How concerned should we be?
Oh, my God.
A common sense recap of the day's biggest stories. It's John Catsimatidis and Rita Cosby. Katz and Cosby on 77 WABC.
And joining us now here on Katz and Cosby with the very latest is former Deputy National Security Advisor under President Trump, Victoria Coates. Victoria, this is really concerning. This Afghan national who got into the United States and got there right after that horrible withdrawal of Afghanistan, that dismal withdrawal, and now was plotting a mass attack on America on Election Day. Tell us how big of a threat this is.
Yeah, this is really terrible, and it's really good to be with you and John. And but I think Americans have to wake up to the long-term national security ramifications of the surrender of Afghanistan and the very chaotic, poorly planned way in which it was done. Because nobody had time to vet anybody. The State Department was in complete disarray. And legitimately, there were some interpreters that people very much wanted to get out who had helped us for 20 years. But bad apples got in amongst them. And now we have a guy who was planning a mass murder attempt with a minor, with a child. The idea was they would both become martyrs to the glorious ISIS cause here and take out as many Americans as they could at a moment when they could cause us the most disruption on Election Day. So this, I think, just points to this horrible, bad overall general immigration policy that this administration has embraced, but in particular highlights the failures in Afghanistan.
Victoria, too, I was looking that this guy, in fact, came in. He was granted among 70,000 Afghans humanitarian parole during suddenly, like you said, all of a sudden they came during the withdrawal, and that was a mess, as we know. And he's been in the United States since September 2021, and sort of like a sleeper cell, if you will, which is, to me, one of the biggest concerns. And you hear from Christopher Wray all the time saying that there's all these sleeper cells in America. This is scary stuff.
But Rita, how many people are involved?
Well, in this case, we know it's two at least.
Well,
in this case,
but two, I understand they can do damage to one place, but they can't do national damage.
Right. Well, you have to wonder what are the other ones out there. Who knows? These are the ones they busted, John. That's what worries me.
No, I couldn't agree with you more, Rita. And what we also don't know is how many related folks have crept across the southern border. And so, are they communicating? Are they just kind of generally looking for targets of opportunity? We don't know. And whenever Director Wray goes up in front of Congress and goes on and on about how all the red lights are flashing, that is just a cover your own posterior exercise if I ever saw one, because he's the director of the FBI. Why isn't he doing something about this? Why isn't he making us safer? And instead, he's overseeing the policy that could lead to a really horrific attack.
Yeah, the other thing, too, and John, we were talking about this earlier, is the merchant of death. This is the guy who was traded for Brittany Griner, the WNBA star, remember, in Russia? I don't know if you saw this report. He is now selling weapons to the Houthis, John. This is so scary.
Absolutely.
It's horrible. There's no controls anywhere in any part of our governments. We don't have a chief executive officer to worry about each department, and the people in those departments, I guess they lack a lot.
Yeah. What are your thoughts, Victoria?
Well, I think we should not be shocked that the merchant of death has gone back to dealing death. And this is definitely an escalation. The Houthi haven't had Russian missiles before. They've been using Iranian missiles. And this just shows you, Rita, how sort of convoluted the Iranian, Russia, and Chinese problem set is becoming. They're starting to be each other's source of resupply. They're starting to arm each other's proxies. And, this is increasingly becoming one problem. And that is going to be a huge challenge to whoever wins in November.
Yeah, no doubt. The other thing, Victoria, too. We're hearing that Biden and Netanyahu finally spoke, but that Biden keeps telling him, don't, when you retaliate after the 200 Iranian missiles that rained on your country, don't hit nuclear facilities, don't hit oil fields. I mean, they continue to make Israel fight with one hand tied behind their back.
No, it's ridiculous. And President Trump came out recently and said publicly he does think they should hit the nuclear facilities. That was always his approach, that Israel should be the kinetic arm of this, but that it was a threat to both of our countries. And he's particularly concerned about a nuclear-armed Iran, as he should be. And a piece just dropped in the Wall Street Journal a couple of minutes ago, actually, about how the administration leaked to the Journal that they're very frustrated that the Israelis won't give them their campaign plans for whatever the strike might be. And I think, of course, they're not giving them to you because they'll just read about it in the same press that you're leaking to right now. And that's how they would preempt or make less effective an Israeli strike. And it's very disappointing to those of us who worked very closely with Israeli colleagues. And our motto was always no surprises, to see that the relationship has come this far off the rails under the Biden-Harris administration.
We have serious problems in our country. And November 5th can't come fast enough, and I can't believe anybody would actually vote for Harris. After the other day, she said that she's going to back everything that President Biden is doing. She will do too.
Absolutely. It'll be 4 more years. And so what do we have to top Afghanistan surrender, invasion of Ukraine, terrorist attack on Israel? I mean, what's next? Will we have a nuclear Iran? Will we have an Chinese attack on Taiwan? Can we stand 4 more years of this? And I couldn't agree with you more, John. I don't think this is a choice at all. It is pretty clear cut.
Yeah, I do too. Well, Victoria, thank you so much for joining us. Such important stuff to talk about, and keep us posted on all fronts. And thanks for all you do to keep us safe, Victoria. Thank you.
Thank you.
And, Judge Weinberg, it's unbelievable that Biden talks to Netanyahu. They haven't talked in weeks, and he's still telling them what to hit and what not to hit.
And remember what Secretary of Defense Gates said about Joe Biden in terms of national security, foreign policy, military affairs. He never got anything right. He was always wrong. The fact of the matter is, the only reason that Israel is in a strong position now to survive is because it disregarded the attempts to hold them in check. Hamas would still be hitting hard. Hezbollah would still be bombing. The Houthis would still be taking over. The only one who's actually fighting a war for Western civilization to protect Western interests is Israel, and we should be standing behind Israel because they're fighting our fight.
Absolutely.
And why it's so complicated to understand that when they say Israel is the little Satan, the United States is the big Satan, United States and Western Europe are next. What is wrong with these people?
I agree.
Rudy Washington?
Kat, I noticed nobody seems to be talking about it, but 2 days ago, there was an earthquake supposedly below Iran.
We talked about it. Yeah,
we talked about it on Friday.
Right.
We talked about it on Monday. We talked about it on Tuesday. And we're trying to ascertain, is it a nuclear explosion or was it an earthquake?
Right. And have we gotten an answer?
Not yet.
I mean, because we've sat around and allowed the one country in the world that gets the nuclear bomb that will use it, Iran.
Absolutely. And that's why for Biden to say, don't hit here, don't hit there. What does he want? To wait until say they do have it?
I don't want to say
maybe
that.
They already do.
Whose side is he on?
I hate to say, I agree, John.
I don't want to say it.
I agree.
It's certainly not our side.
Rita, let's have some big news.
It's the top news of the day, sponsored by Goya. Here's Rita Cosby.
And everybody, as we were talking here at the top of Cats and Cosby, Hurricane Milton is approaching Florida's Gulf Coast. The National Hurricane Center says Milton is a catastrophic Category 3 hurricane and will be extremely dangerous when it hits Florida's central coast, either early tonight or very early tomorrow morning. Multiple tornado warnings have already been issued, and 2 large tornadoes were spotted all over Florida. Really dramatic images. And everybody, the Justice Department may ask a judge to break up Google's search engine from other parts of its company. Federal prosecutors accuse the tech giant of holding an illegal monopoly over online search. They're looking at multiple options. According to a court filing, it could mean banning Google from entering into agreements that make its search engine the default on devices or requiring it to share data with its rivals. And those are the hot stories of the day.
You're commuting home with Katz and Cosby. Now, here's John Catsimatidis and Rita Cosby on 77 WABC.
And we are back here on Katz and Cosby, and joining us now is the great legal scholar. He is also a professor of law at the University of California, Berkeley, John Yoo. John, we're so happy to have you here, Professor Yoo. This is interesting. I don't know if you saw this. This is Woodward's new book that just came out, or previews to it, which is coming out in a few days. And in it, he says that President Biden's very upset with Merrick Garland because he went after his son. I mean, this has been the most political attorney general, and he thinks it should have been hands off his son. Your thoughts about that?
Hey, it's great to be back with you guys again. And yeah, as you say, it's incredible that Joe Biden is complaining about the treatment of Hunter Biden when his own Justice Department went after Donald Trump and has been forestalled by the courts. The special counsel investigation there was slapped down by the Supreme Court about as hard as you can be. At the same time, the Hunter Biden prosecution was actually delayed and almost swept under the rug with a sweetheart plea deal. And it was only because of public outside pressure from Congress and observers and the media that the Justice Department was forced into appointing a special counsel in the first place. If Joe Biden had had his way, if Merrick Garland had had their way in the beginning, we never would have heard of any major prosecution and investigation of Hunter Biden.
Professor, you said it exactly right, and I'm glad you brought it up. And if we don't get the right people in Congress, Senate, and the executive office, everything else is going to be buried from November 5th on.
I worry about that. I quite agree. I mean, even if you don't have the Justice Department conducting full and fair investigations, Congress still has a role, and you and the media have a role in bringing to light what happened and demanding action. And that's what happened in the Hunter Biden case. Remember that Hunter Biden was going to plead guilty for no jail time and was going to be let off on all these charges and investigations.
Professor, if the right way doesn't happen November 5th, they're going to come take away some of the media too.
Oh, gosh.
You'll bail us out, right?
Don't count on me. I don't think I'm licensed to practice law in New York, but I think you have some people on your show who are. Call them.
Well, we've got one here. Judge Weinberg. Go ahead, Judge Weinberg.
John, good to talk to you again. So how do you like this idea from the vice presidential nominee of the Democratic Party that we should abolish the Electoral College? Has this person ever read the Constitution? Has he ever looked at the debates at the Constitutional Convention? Is he familiar with the Federalist Papers? Where do they get these ideas from, John?
I'm glad you raised that. I'm one of the few academic defenders of the Electoral College, but it's a part of a broader problem, and Kamala Harris is part of this. You know, she has said she wants to pack the Supreme Court. She has said she'd get rid of the Electoral College back when she was running for office in 2020. She represents, it worries me greatly, this sharp edge of the progressive movement that they don't like the results of our political system. They don't get everything they want. And what's the answer is change all the rules. Throw all these institutions out that have served our country so well for over 200 years because it's getting in the way of whatever they want immediately, whether it's redistributing income or giving everybody more money for houses and student loans or so on and so forth, affirmative actions, go on. All of our institutions and processes are meant for our democracy to work better, to slow us down from making mistakes. And they just want to rush to judgment because they think they have the right answer to everything.
And if they abolish the filibuster in the Senate and the Democrats control the Senate and they try to push through legislation that makes District of Columbia a state, Puerto Rico a state, you're now going to have 4 additional Democratic senators. You'll never have a chance for the Republicans to win the Senate again in our lifetime. So you have no checks and balances, John.
Yeah, people, I don't think, may realize how close things are. That if the Democrats get a majority in the Senate and they control the White House, there's no more Kristen Sinema. There's no more Joe Manchin in the Senate. The moderate Democratic wing of the party has disappeared. They just need 51 votes to get rid of the filibuster, and then they could add 6 more justices to the Supreme Court, as many of them want. They could start to erode the Electoral College, right? They could start adding more states, as you say. People don't realize it's not just the presidential election that's so important, but the election for House and Senate. To me, that's equally important for the long-term health of our institutions.
And they use the administrative agencies to mandate public policies that are not passed by Congress. So, for example, they're going to get rid of gas-powered cars using EPA mandates for the number of electric cars you have to have. How do you allow that to happen?
Yeah, the funny thing, Judge, is a lot of the critics of conservatives are angry at the Supreme Court, but what they don't realize is that the Supreme Court is trying to force decisions like that. What kind of cars we drive, whether we can have student loans at what rates, how much pollution should we allow, and so on and so forth. The court is trying to force those decisions back to democracy, trying to force those decisions back to Congress, when presidents of both parties have been very happy to take power from Congress to make all these decisions. And Congress has been so far happy to give it up because they don't want to have to make tough calls, make tough votes. And so actually our courts have been trying to push our democracy to work better by forcing these decisions back to Congress.
Professor, every time I listen to one of these conversations, this is Rudy Washington, it just makes me understand how brilliant that this Constitution is. I mean, the reason why we are economic powerhouse and everybody invests here is because of the rule of law. And without the rule of law, we'll have total chaos. I mean, so you're right in everything you're saying, and every time I hear it, I'm just in awe. Thank you.
Hey, if you want to look at what we don't want to be like, look at what Europe's gone through the last 100 years or 200 years. Because they didn't have our Constitution. They've had fascism, monarchies, communism, socialism, swinging back. Our Constitution keeps us on the straight and narrow, and it's got a lot to do, I think, with the success of our country, avoiding all the crazy ideas and the millions of deaths that have occurred in Europe and Asia. I think our Constitution has protected us from that.
Professor John Yoo, I also want to move on to the idea of like the weaponization. It's been interesting because as we're talking about Tim Walz and Kamala Harris, they've been out there saying, oh, Trump is going to weaponize the justice system. I'm like, talk about gaslighting. Look at what has been happening to President Trump. He still has that sentencing hearing. Remember the sentencing date? That's after the election. I mean, you can't, what is your reaction when you hear that?
Yeah, when I hear these claims about Trump, the Sunday New York Times Magazine had a cover story about this, right? First, did it happen in the first term? No. In fact, what did Trump do? He allowed this huge special counsel investigation led by Robert Mueller to basically paralyze the first 2 years of his presidency. He didn't fire Mueller. I actually thought he should fire Mueller. He didn't fire Mueller. He allowed it to go on. He didn't interfere with the Justice Department investigation. Compare it to what we've seen here with the Hunter Biden investigation not being properly followed in the beginning, and then this special counsel, Jack Smith, going after Donald Trump. And look, if he had new evidence, if he was going to charge Trump with insurrection, with sedition, I'd be willing to listen to it. He's charging Trump with fraud. He's charging Trump with stealing money from the United States. This is a ridiculous independent counsel investigation. Makes it all the more political.
Yeah, and you know what, they continue to say, it's the biggest threat to democracy ever in the world history. And I'm thinking, I think we've gone through more difficult times.
The psychiatrists call that projection.
Yes. I mean, when you sit and you look, you just got to be rolling your eyes, John Yoo.
And Trump didn't try to put Hillary in jail.
Right.
And he had all the evidence to do it.
Professor?
I agree. I mean, Trump actually chose not to weaponize the Justice Department, even though for his campaign he'd said, lock her up, but he chose not to. Right? He actually did what all his predecessors had. And Biden and his attorney general are the ones who, the first time in American history, prosecuted a former president. They're the ones who, for the first time in American history, prosecuted the main opposition candidate for president. I mean, that is a serious threat to democracy. Again, the Democrats are afraid of Trump as a person, but their answer is to try to destroy the institutions that have served us so well because they're so deranged by Trump.
Yeah, it's that Trump derangement syndrome. Well, John, thank you very much. It's really great to have you here. We always love having you on.
Oh, anytime. I love being with you guys. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. And then, you guys, by the way, the date I want to tell everybody, Madison Square Garden, it is October 27th, John.
27th.
Yeah. Can you imagine Trump at Madison Square Garden, a week and a half before the election?
I bet he's going to fill the place up.
I bet, and it's 20,000 seats in the big arena. Isn't that interesting?
20,000 seats plus what's on the ground.
So that's going to. I think he'll pack it in, don't you? I think it's going to
be closer to 30,000.
Wow, that's a biggie in New York City. Wow.
Let's take a break, and who are we coming back with?
We have Michael Goodwin, Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist, with some interesting stuff on Eric Adams.
It's a common sense recap of the big stories. It's Katz and Cosby on 77 WABC.
With us today is Michael Goodwin, a columnist from the New York Post, a Pulitzer Prize-winning author. And Michael Goodwin, you had a great article in the New York Post today about Eric Adams. What are your thoughts?
Oh, thank you, John. Look, I think we're in a very bizarre moment, even given the long history of colorful characters, shall we say, in New York politics. The mayor, as everyone knows, has been indicted on 5 federal counts, and yet there is no great push for him to leave office. Of course, there are some, particularly other Democrats who want his job, are urging that he be pushed out. But the public at large, there's no great movement. And I think what that signifies is that New Yorkers look at the Democratic Party backbenchers and those who want to be frontbenchers, and they say, no thanks. Particularly the public advocate, Jumaane Williams, would become acting mayor if Eric Adams were to leave before the end of his term. And I think Jumaane Williams is nobody's choice of a great mayor. I mean, he's very far left, somewhat of a lightweight in the sense that he just isn't around. I mean, he's sort of invisible and pops up once in a while, but basically I think is a non-factor in anything that's happening in the city. He would be mayor for a certain period, depending on if Adams left and when it was. And of course, there's the Republican Party, which, remains on life support. No obvious candidate there yet. You notwithstanding, John, I know you've talked about it, but too early to say. And I do think that the public is saying, well, Adams may be the best of a bad lot for now. And so here he is, going around saying that he's not only going to fight the charges against him and remain in office, he's going to seek re-election. Now, some of this, I think, is about just trying to create an image that he's tough and that he's not going to go easily. But I think all of that has complicated the calculations of Governor Hochul. She has the power to remove him. And when he was indicted, it certainly seemed to be suggesting that that's the way she was leaning. She said she was giving the mayor a couple of days to think this over. Well, there's only one way to read that, and I hope he resigns so I don't have to remove him myself. He said, hell no, and she has stayed her hand, has apparently settled for telling him he has to clean house. Ergo, all of these departures that we see, resignations really by the dozens, it seems. Every day there's somebody new. Yesterday there was another indictment for hiding on the charge of destroying evidence, intimidating witnesses. The feds say that Eric Adams may face more charges. So we'll see. But right now it looks like the job is his until there's another shoe drops.
Well, I mean, my position has always been, and I've said this publicly, is that we got to find out what the real charges are. I mean, I think the government is still trying to gather information, and if it's just an upgrade for on an airplane or an upgrade on a hotel room, that's nothing. I mean, but if it's serious and the government does something, then something's going to happen.
Well, no, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think that is part of the calculus that people are making, that these charges are not earth-shattering. They're not public enemy number one kind of crimes. There's the upgrades. There's this idea of a quid pro quo, but even that's a little iffy. The helping the Turkish consulate open, he wasn't mayor at that point. And I think the ones that may have some teeth are the straw donations and this idea of foreign nationals making contributions to his campaign. In some cases, the charges have the same people doing both of those things. Foreign nationals making campaigns and then getting reimbursed by their bosses or whatever. So, and it all seems to be Turks by and large. But look, I think that's to be proven. And I would also point out that I rarely agree with Al Sharpton on anything these days, but his point that Robert Menendez, the senator from New Jersey, the former senator of New Jersey, was indicted for being a foreign agent for Egypt, extortion, bribery, etc., and no one called for him to resign from the Senate. He did resign only after he was convicted. And so Sharpton draws the point that those are really much more serious charges than Eric Adams faces. And Menendez has been convicted of them, whereas Adams has just been indicted. So that is an argument as well that I think is giving Adams some more room and some more time.
I believe that, and he does have the room. I think, how did the British say it? Let's see what, let's see what happens. We're just,
I think we are in a kind of,
if it's really serious, then something serious will happen.
Yes, and I think we're in a wait and see, which is itself, kind of remarkable when you realize he is the first mayor in the history of New York City to be indicted while in office.
Well, we do have a strange Department of Justice these days.
Well, that's another factor, isn't it?
It is another factor, because if you're an enemy of the White House, you're an enemy.
And Adams has made that claim, that that's part of that this is politically motivated, which puts him in the camp of Donald Trump. And a lot of other people who feel that Merrick Garland has really politicized the Justice Department. Now, it's interesting. There's stories in Bob Woodward's new book that Joe Biden is furious at Merrick Garland, but that's because he prosecuted Hunter Biden. But even that is odd, because he let it languish for years and years into the administration, and he brought down the hammer on Donald Trump, which Joe Biden wanted. So the
question is, Michael, is Merrick Garland really running the Department of Justice? There's been accusations that the people behind him that are Democratic National Committee operatives are running the Department of Justice.
Well, there is a lot of that concern that I think one of his top deputies, I think her name is Lisa Monaco, is regarded as a real Democratic activist. And that, look, I reported that the FBI was never told that some of these things, some of these charges, all of this were going to play out the way they did. That the FBI, for example, would not have agreed to the raid on Trump's home at Mar-a-Lago. But the Justice Department didn't ask the FBI.
No, but they didn't. The Miami FBI, I understand what I heard, that the Miami FBI refused to do it. or didn't want to do it, and they brought in the Washington hit squad, FBI.
Yes, but they never consulted the top of the FBI, which you would normally do for something so significant. So there are lots of rumblings about a corrupted Department of Justice under Merrick Garland. But that doesn't mean the Eric Adams case fits that description.
It doesn't mean that if Eric Adams is significantly guilty other than an upgrade of an airplane ticket, then I think something's going to happen.
Yes, I do too. And I think that's, again, another argument to wait and see how this thing plays out. Again, the backdrop being that there's no obvious successor that the public is lusting for. And so, as you say, let see
things
what
sort
happens,
themselves out.
Because things could get worse.
Yes. Thank you so much, Michael Goodwin, and we'll catch up with you again real soon.
My pleasure. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Very interesting discussion. And boy, so many moving parts. I mean, what an unbelievable time it is, Judge, when you're looking at what's going on in New York, what's going on in Florida, what's going on in the Mideast.
And we should not, and when we're talking about Eric Adams, let's not rush to judgment. He's entitled to presumption of innocence. And let's just settle down and let the system play out.
Yeah, and right now, it looks like a lot of upgrades on, hotel rooms and flights and things like that, and the timing is questionable, too.
Well,
you're right.
Just give it, let things sort themselves out. I always want to give everybody a fair chance.
Absolutely, guys. Absolutely. 100%. And boy, obviously, our thoughts and prayers today, everybody with the folks there in Florida, of course, in the Southeast, others recuperating, and just prayers for Florida as they are bracing for Milton's landfall in a matter of hours.
Yes. And, the good news is the wind seems to be down a little bit, but, it's down to a Category 3.
Yeah, which, by the way, Katrina was a Category 3. I covered Katrina, guys, and it was a mess.
It was a mess.
It was a mess. Let's pray.
Let's pray. Let's all pray for all our friends in Florida, and it's something. It's such a destructive force.
It is. It's so sad. And guys, in the meantime, what do we all stand for?
Truth, justice, and the American way.
God bless them.